You don't have confidence, you have armor. And the armor is heavy. You call it self-assurance, you call it growth, you call it maturity, you call it leadership. But it isn't strength, it's protection. You didn't build confidence because you're powerful. You built it because you were afraid. In the first episode of this series, we exposed the lie of self-help. It wasn't about becoming better, it was about quietly hating yourself in sophisticated ways. In the second episode, we exposed the command to fix yourself. It wasn't empowerment, it was self-salvation. It was the belief that you must repair yourself in order to be worthy. Now we go deeper, because confidence is what happens when self-hate becomes polished. Confidence is what happens when insecurity learns how to speak clearly. The world worships confidence. In business, confidence gets promoted. In church, confidence gets platformed. On social media, confidence gets followed. In relationships, confidence gets desired. But look carefully. Confidence is rarely the absence of insecurity. It is insecurity that has learned posture. It is fear that has learned tone control. It is shame that has been trained not to tremble. And you learned it early. You didn't wake up at 30 and invent confidence. You were 8, you were 10, you were 13. You were standing in a classroom and felt the room turn on you. You were in a living room and felt ignored. You were on a field and felt exposed. You were in church and felt small. You realized something subtle and devastating. Weakness was not safe, so you adjusted. Maybe you became funny. Maybe you became loud. Maybe you became disciplined. Maybe you became intelligent. Maybe you became spiritual. Maybe you became the strong one. But you became something, because who you were naturally did not feel secure. Confidence is adaptation. It is a strategy. It is the moment a child decides, I will never feel that again. You don't remember that decision consciously, but your body does. Your nervous system does. That's why confidence feels necessary. That's why silence feels threatening. That's why you rehearse before you speak. That's why you monitor your tone. That's why you calculate how you're being perceived. That's why you can't relax when you're not performing well. You call that self-awareness. It is hypervigilance. Confidence is insecurity under management. Not insecurity eliminated. The most confident person in the room often needs the room the most. They need the affirmation. They need the validation. They need the reinforcement. Because without it, the structure collapses. Confidence is high maintenance. It requires upkeep. You must continue proving yourself, continue achieving, continue signaling value, continue demonstrating control. You cannot rest inside confidence, because confidence is built on defense. Defense against what? Rejection, comparison, insignificance. The feeling of not being enough. In episode 1, we said self-help equals self-hate. In episode 2, we said fixing yourself is self-salvation. Confidence is the fruit of both. It is self-hate disguised as competence. It is self-salvation disguised as charisma. Confidence says, I am secure because I have built myself. But what you built is a mask, and masks are fragile. That's why confident people can crumble privately. That's why the leader can feel hollow. That's why the strong one can feel terrified at night, because the mask is maintained, not embodied. Confidence is performance, and performance is exhausting. You measure every room. You adjust to every audience. You shift tone depending on hierarchy. You amplify strength. You suppress doubt. You curate vulnerability so it looks attractive but never destabilizing. You say just enough weakness to seem human, but never enough to feel naked. That is not freedom. That is stagecraft, and the world rewards it. The world says, be confident. It does not say, be surrendered, because confidence builds systems. Surrender dissolves them. Confidence says, I can. Christ says, without me, you cannot. Confidence says, believe in yourself. Christ says, deny yourself. That is not poetic metaphor. That is confrontation. Christ did not come to help you polish your confidence. He came to dismantle it. He did not call fishermen because they were confident. He called them because they were willing to leave. He did not affirm the self-made. He shattered the self-righteous. The Pharisees were confident. Confident in morality, confident in theology, confident in discipline, confident in image. And he called them whitewashed tombs, clean outside, rot inside. That is not religious insult, that is psychological exposure. Confidence without surrender is ego preservation. It is the belief that your stability must come from you, your competence, your clarity, your strength, your discipline, your insight. But anything that must be maintained can collapse, and you know this. You feel the tension in your body when you fail publicly. You feel the shame spike when you say something stupid. You feel the panic when your image cracks. That panic is not random. It is the fear of exposure. Because if confidence drops, what is left? Insecurity. And you have spent your life outrunning insecurity. You thought confidence killed it. It didn't. It buried it. Insecurity is still there. It just wears nicer clothes. Confidence is insecurity in costume. And the deeper you go, the more subtle it becomes. Spiritual confidence, intellectual confidence, emotional confidence. You become the person who understands things, who sees clearly, who is above the chaos. But that too can be armor. You can be confident about your humility, confident about your theology, confident about your enlightenment. But Christ does not negotiate with armor. He confronts it. He did not build confident men. He dismantled them. Peter was confident until he wasn't. Paul was confident until he was blinded. The pattern is consistent. Before surrender, there is collapse. Before resurrection, there is death. And this is the part you resist. Because if confidence dies, you feel exposed. You feel childlike. You feel uncertain. You feel small. But that smallness is not shame. It is truth. Confidence says, I must hold myself together. Christ says, come to me. Confidence says, I will establish my worth. Christ says, it was never yours to establish. Confidence is self-establishment. Christ is surrender. That is why confidence cannot coexist with him in its current form. Because confidence centers you. Christ recenters everything. If your confidence vanished tomorrow, who would you be? Not the version you present, not the image you curate, not the tone you control. Who would you be without performance? That question feels threatening. Because performance has been your safety. You survived with it. You were admired because of it. You were accepted because of it. But survival is not life. Confidence is survival. Life begins when survival is no longer your master. And that feels like death, because the false self is built on defense. The false self says, never be weak. The true self says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Poor in spirit is not low self-esteem. It is the death of self-sufficiency. It is the collapse of self-establishment. It is the end of performance. Christ does not make you more confident. He makes confidence unnecessary. He does not give you better armor. He removes it. That removal feels violent because it strips away the identity you built to survive. But once the armor falls, something else appears. Not dominance, not charisma, not bravado. Presence, unforced, unmanaged, unimpressive, stable. The kind of presence that does not need to be seen to exist. The kind that does not rise and fall with opinion. The kind that does not spike with praise or collapse with criticism. Confidence fluctuates, surrender stabilizes. Confidence is loud because it is defending. Christ is quiet because he is not. The cross is not a symbol of confidence, it is a symbol of exposure, of nakedness, of surrender. If your confidence is fake, and it is, then you have a choice. You can refine it, strengthen it, polish it, or you can let it die. Letting it die will feel like falling, like disappearing, like losing your footing. But it is not falling. It is grounding. It is returning to the center that was never performance-based. And here is the hard truth. Once confidence collapses, you will try to replace it. You will say, I don't need confidence, I need healing. You will begin analyzing, dissecting trauma, attaching identity to wounds, finding language for your pain. And that too can become control. That too can become performance, because the false self adapts. It survives by evolving. Confidence is only one version of it. When confidence dies, the false self searches for another strategy, and the next strategy feels softer, more aware, more socially approved, but it can be just as binding. This isn't about confidence. It's about the self you have been protecting since you were a child. The self that believed it had to prove something to exist. The self that thought it needed armor. The self that mistook survival for strength. Confidence is fake because it was built on fear. Christ is real because he was built on nothing. Nothing to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to secure. He did not enter rooms to dominate them. He entered them to expose them. If your confidence vanished, you would not become worthless. You would become honest. And honesty feels like death before it feels like freedom. The armor is heavy. You are tired. You feel it in the tension in your jaw, in the rehearsed conversations in your head, in the need to get it right, in the fear of being seen weak. You don't need more confidence. You need surrender. And surrender is not self-improvement. It is self-ending. Confidence is fake, but the insecurity underneath it is not your enemy. It is your doorway, the doorway to the death of performance, and the beginning of something that does not need to perform at all. And once that performance ends, you will not chase confidence, you will chase healing. And that chase may look softer, but it can hide the same control. And that is where we are going next.